Watching The Outer Limits at the age of 5 with my older brother was one of the most terrifying experiences of my childhood. His warning that the monster would crawl out of the television and grab me was horrifying. I became so obsessed with that idea that whenever the screen went dark, I would hold my breath, waiting for something to crawl out from inside it. It wasn't until my first year of college that I finally let go of that fear. But like many childhood nightmares, The Outer Limits wasn't frightening only because of how it looked. Growing up and revisiting it with a different perspective, I realized something else. Some episodes weren't just designed to scare children. They touched on dark psychological and moral territory that 1960s television rarely dared to approach. Did you know that some episodes were considered so disturbing that ABC banned them from rebroadcast for decades, that certain alien creatures triggered genuine insect phobias in children across the United States? And that some ideas in The Outer Limits went so far beyond the limits of acceptable television at the time that they were effectively buried alive in network archives. Today, let's peel back the strange and unsettling truths behind The Outer Limits. 1963. A series that didn't just terrify children, but also forced the television industry itself to confront the consequences of what it had allowed onto the air. 15. Corpus Earthling, the darkest episode of The Outer Limits about the fear of being seen as insane. Do you remember the scene where Dr. Paul Cameron stands motionless in the laboratory as the inanimate stones suddenly whisper in a cold voice, "We must choose the hardiest specimens"? That is the moment The Outer Limits steps fully into the territory of pure horror. Paul Cameron is not paranoid. A fragment of metal left in his head from an old injury accidentally allows him to pick up signals from alien beings disguised as rocks. They do not merely talk. They plan an invasion selecting humans like livestock. When Paul tries to warn others, he is dismissed as insane who would believe that rocks can talk. The aliens believe him. They immediately mark Paul as a threat and use mind control to force him to jump from a laboratory window. Only thanks to the quick reaction of his wife Laurie does Paul survive. Believing himself to have gone mad, Paul flees to Mexico in search of peace. But the danger does not let go. The entities take over the body of his colleague Dr. Temple and begin a silent hunt. 14. The Architects of Fear, one of the most disturbing episodes of The Outer Limits. This scene surely still makes many viewers shudder. A man strapped to an operating table, harsh lights glaring down on his face, surrounded by scientists whose silence is deeply unsettling. There is no monster descending from outer space. The monster is being created right before our eyes. The Architects of Fear is one of the most disturbing episodes of The Outer Limits because it poses a chilling moral question. How much are we willing to sacrifice to prevent nuclear war? A group of scientists believe that humanity can only unite if it faces a common enemy from outer space. Their solution is not diplomacy, but staging a fake invasion by turning a human being into an alien creature. The victim is not chosen at random, but through a childishly cruel lottery. The transformation unfolds slowly, painfully, and irreversibly. The most horrifying aspect is not the prosthetics, but the calm composure of those carrying it out. They truly believe they are doing the right thing. 13. ABC banned many episodes from rebroadcast for decades. ABC refused to include several episodes in syndication packages, claiming they exceeded the limits of what was acceptable for family television, especially for children. The Bolero Shield remained banned until the 1980s because it featured a woman killing an alien creature in a cold, unflinching manner. The Forms of Things Unknown was never rebroadcast because ABC considered it too abstract, nightmarish, and impossible to explain to a mass audience. The episode Ziz was pulled from schedules after entomologists complained that it could cause children to develop long-lasting fears of insects. The most controversial case was Demon with a Glass Hand, which was restricted due to its dystopian themes and existential violence. Harlan Ellison, the episode's writer, publicly criticised ABC for censoring his work. These banned episodes became legendary among fanspeople who had only heard about them but never seen them. Bootleg copies circulated at science fiction conventions throughout the 1970s. Some episodes remained very difficult to find until DVD releases in the 2000s. 12. The cancellation of the series had nothing to do with ratings. The Outer Limits actually maintained very stable ratings throughout its 2 seasons, frequently ranking among the top 30 most popular television programs of the time. Even so, in January 1965, ABC decided to cancel the series, leaving many viewers stunned. The real reason lay in conflicts with sponsors. The show's dark tone, rich in horror and philosophical elements, made many brands uneasy about associating their names with disturbing imagery. During the 2nd season, viewer complaints began to pile up and several sponsors gradually withdrew. Procter & Gamble, the largest sponsor, demanded that the show reduce monsters, violence and heavy themes. Leslie Stevens refused to compromise his creative vision. Without stable sponsorship, ABC could not justify the high production costs, approximately $140,000 per episode, an extremely large figure in the mid-1960s. The network offered to continue if Stevens accepted a reduced budget of $90,000 per episode, but he did not agree, and the fate of the series is exactly what you would expect. 11. The Zanti misfits caused a wave of ant phobia across the United States. Do you remember the Zanti creatures? With giant insect bodies and grotesquely distorted human faces, they created a level of unease never before seen on prime-time television. As a result, the episode, The Zanti Misfits, broadcast in December 1963, became one of the most terrifying television memories for children of that era. The reaction went far beyond simple fear. Psychologists at the time recorded a noticeable increase in cases of ant phobia among children after the episode aired. Many parents sent complaints to ABC reporting that their children refused to go outside, panicked at the sight of insects, and even suffered prolonged nightmares. Some severe cases required psychological treatment. The Zanti creature design was deliberately made unsettling and unnatural, created by makeup artist John Chambers, who later became famous for Planet of the Apes. ABC reportedly received more than 2,000 complaint letters, turning the Zanti Misfits into one of the most controversial and haunting episodes in the history of The Outer Limits. 10. Robert Culp appeared in more episodes than any other actor. It is hard to forget the image of a scientist strapped inside a transformation chamber, an alien mask closing in while human terror still lingers in his eyes. That was Robert Culp in The Architects of Fear, and it was only one of 3 times he carried an episode of The Outer Limits. Culp starred in 3 completely different episodes: The Architects of Fear Demon with a glass hand and Cold Hand's Warm Heart, while no other actor appeared more than twice. Although the roles were unrelated, his face and performance gradually became a familiar signature of the series. The Architects of Fear in particular required extremely heavy makeup. Culp spent hours in the makeup chair and then performed inside a tight, restrictive creature suit. His commitment impressed creator Leslie Stevens so much that he wrote Demon with a glass hand specifically for Culp just a few months later. 9. Created to compete directly with the Twilight Zone, Leslie Stevens developed The Outer Limits with a very clear goal to become ABC's answer to the massive success of The Twilight Zone on CBS. While its rival dominated the time slot with intellectually ironic science fiction stories, ABC needed something distinctly different. And Stevens proposed a darker, more aggressive series focused on grotesque creatures and the horror of the human body. The network quickly greenlit the project in early 1963. The Outer Limits was scheduled in a direct head-to-head time slot airing Monday nights in competition with lighter, family-oriented programming. Stevens once described his ambition as creating a Twilight Zone on steroids, a show where shocking imagery and unease took precedence over clever intellectual twists. The strategy initially worked. The series quickly attracted younger viewers who felt the Twilight Zone was too tame. But that same intensity became a double-edged sword. Parents began complaining about their children's nightmares, and ABC faced constant pressure to soften the content throughout the show's run. 8. The famous "Please, stand by" opening with the control voice. "There is nothing wrong with your television set." This was the line spoken by Vic Perrin. This control voice narration became the most recognizable element of The Outer Limits, even more famous than any individual episode. Leslie Stevens wrote the opening deliberately to unsettle viewers, making them question whether their television sets were actually malfunctioning. In 1963, audiences were not accustomed to metafictional techniques. Many viewers genuinely believed their televisions were broken when the opening played. A BC received hundreds of calls during the early episodes from confused viewers attempting to adjust their sets. Some people immediately changed channels, assuming a technical problem. Stevens loved this confusion, believing it heightened the show's sense of unease. The control voice opening became so iconic that parodies appeared within just a few months. Notably, Perrin received no residual payments despite the opening being broadcast a total of 49 times. 7. Actors were hospitalized because of dangerous monster costumes. I still remember flinching at the sight of gigantic creatures emerging from the darkness, their wrinkled rubber skin glistening under studio lights as tiny humans recoiled in fear. What looked like a nightmare on screen was even more dangerous in real life. The monster costumes on The Outer Limits created genuinely hazardous working conditions. The suits weighed between 18 and 27 kilograms and had almost no ventilation. Actors frequently collapsed from heat exhaustion during filming. Janusz Prohaska, who portrayed many different creatures, was hospitalized twice during the first season for dehydration and heat stroke. The episode The Zanti Misfits required performers in ant costumes to work under hot studio lights for 12 hours a day. That episode alone resulted in 3 actors needing medical attention. The Theaton creature suit in The Architects of Fear was so heavy and restrictive that Robert Culp, not a stunt performer, insisted on wearing it himself for certain scenes. Culp suffered severe back pain for weeks afterward. A BC's insurance company threatened to refuse coverage unless safety procedures were improved. Leslie Stevens reluctantly agreed to shorter shooting days and mandatory cooling breaks for actors wearing creature suits. 6. The sixth finger accurately predicted human evolution. Do you remember the moment when Gilm stands in front of the mirror, slowly raising his trembling hand and realizing he has grown an extra finger? His eyes filled with panic as his intelligence accelerates faster than his body can endure. The Sixth Finger, which aired in November 1963, depicts a process of accelerated human evolution. The makeup effects show an enlarged cranium, reduced facial features, and an additional finger. Scientists who watched the episode were astonished by its accuracy. The evolutionary predictions presented in the episode aligned closely with contemporary anthropological theories. Paleontologist Stephen Jay Gould later cited the sixth finger as a remarkably prescient example of science fiction. The episode suggests that future humans would possess larger brains, weaker bodies, and superior intellectual abilities closely matching evolutionary biology theories that were gaining acceptance during the 1960s. David McCallum's performance as the evolving Gilm required 7 hours of makeup application for the final stage. The prosthetics were so elaborate that he could not eat or drink while wearing them, and he lost 8 pounds during the episode's 5-day shooting schedule. The series accidentally gave birth to television's first cyberpunk story. Remember the scene of a man waking up with a metallic arm covered in strange symbols, each finger opening like a living data gateway. In that moment, Demon with a glass hand crossed into territory television had never explored before. Airing in October 1964, the episode delved into ideas that would not be labelled cyberpunk until nearly 2 decades later. Artificial intelligence digitized consciousness and humans becoming carriers of data. Robert Culp's character is not merely fleeing enemies, he carries within himself the memory and knowledge of all humanity stored inside a mechanical arm, with each finger functioning as a living hard drive. Harlan Ellison had never heard the concept of cyberpunk when he wrote the script. He was simply pursuing a personal obsession. What happens when technology is no longer a tool, but becomes a dwelling place for human consciousness? Yet it was precisely this curiosity that inadvertently laid the foundation for a subgenre. Science fiction scholars later widely acknowledged that Demon with a Glass Hand preceded William Gibson's Neuromancer by nearly 20 years. 4. The Architects of Fear inspired the villain of Watchmen. The plot of The Architects of Fear, November 1963, centers on scientists who stage a fake alien invasion to force humanity to unite against a common enemy. They surgically transform one of their own into a grotesque alien creature in order to terrify the world into peace. The plan fails tragically when the fabricated alien is killed. More than 2 decades later, Watchmen would replicate this core idea almost exactly. Ozymandias orchestrates a global catastrophe to end war. Author Alan Moore repeatedly acknowledged The Architects of Fear as a direct inspiration for this scheme. The central ethical question, whether the goal of saving the world can justify sacrificing an innocent human being, is posed by both works with the same bleak answer. 3. The entire second season was filmed with a different production team. After the first season ended in May 1964, both Leslie Stevens and Joseph Stefano, the 2 minds who shaped the soul of The Outer Limits, left the series. A BC at that point wanted a safer direction, less darkness, fewer monsters, and lower production costs. Stevens and Stefano refused to compromise and they exited the project simultaneously. The network then handed Season 2 to producer Ben Brady. Brady had never worked in science fiction and did not truly understand what made The Outer Limits special. He removed the heavily atmospheric visual style that had defined the first season. Episodes featuring horror creatures nearly disappeared, replaced by stories that leaned toward purely conceptual ideas. 2. Nightmare amplifies pain, fear, and despair to the point where they become indistinguishable. Do you remember the scene where the Earth soldiers wake up inside a sterile holding chamber under cold lighting with ebonite beings standing motionless behind glass? This is not familiar. Outer space warfare, it is a laboratory designed for fear. In this episode, Earth is locked in an interplanetary war with Ebon. An elite unit of soldiers is sent on a reconnaissance mission only to be quickly captured. The true horror does not lie in their imprisonment, but in the Ebonites' method of interrogation. They do not torture the body. Instead, they attack the senses, memories, and deepest fears of the human mind. Each soldier is forced to endure a personal nightmare where pain, terror, and hopelessness are amplified until reality and illusion can no longer be distinguished. What makes it even more frightening is that the Ebonites show no cruelty. They treat the process as a purely scientific experiment, a way to understand their enemy by systematically breaking the human spirit. Nightmare is not a story about alien monsters. It is a story about how fragile human beings truly are when the things we consider untouchable. Perception, consciousness, identity are taken away. The episode poses a chilling question: if future wars no longer require weapons, but only the control of perception, would we have any ability left to resist at all? 1. A feasibility study is relentlessly terrifying because of its cold logic. Do you remember the moment when familiar suburban houses suddenly vanished in a white flash, only to reappear beneath an alien sky with two suns hanging overhead? In a single cut, the outer limits turned the peaceful American dream into an extraterrestrial nightmare. A feasibility study begins like a relatively gentle science fiction premise. 6 city blocks are lifted from Earth and deposited onto the planet Luminos. But the twist arrives quickly. The Lumoid beings are not there to negotiate or to learn. They need labour, and humans in their eyes are nothing more than biological resources. What makes this episode so frightening is not creature design, but the Lumoids' cold, ruthless reasoning. They do not hate humanity. They simply need to survive. And to do so, they are willing to reduce an entire neighbourhood to a permanent slave class. There is no torture, no screaming, just a brutal equation of survival. So what about you? Which moment from the outer limits is the one you remember most? Leave a comment, and if you want to continue unlocking other deleted scenes from Hollywood's golden age, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. You may be surprised by what Hollywood has kept hidden for decades.